Pastor Jonathan, are you with me? How you
Hey,
doing?
how are you, Matt?
Thank you. Thank you for that teaching. And obviously, we have a faith that is so timely all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
But isn't this a good truth to be able to pull out and highlight and just shine the light on a bit tonight? Thank you for doing that. We've got a question from Yvonne, and her question is, and this is the $1 million question, how can we stand still with God, like biblically, in a way that is not arrogant and legalistic, and still be inclusive with others that have differing opinions and beliefs?
It's going to feel like a bit of a cop-out, but Yvonne, humility. You know what it's like, friends, when you're around someone who's arrogant, has all the answers. They don't build community, they divide community. But humility means that you can stand in those essential things. You need to recognize that there is some either controversy or different perspectives on differing issues that you can allow for room in, even though you may have strong conviction in it. But it's got to be humility, because when you're humble, it's kind of like as you look in Philippians when it kind of likens Jesus, what he was like, and it asks us to prefer one another before ourselves. So we're putting people before us. So it's not about winning the fight then. It's not about winning the argument. It's not about defending God. God can defend himself. It's about valuing the person who's made in the image of God in front of you. They're worthwhile holding carefully and interacting in a way that's respectful and loving, even though they may not change our perspective, and we may hold on to that conviction even tighter as a result of that interaction with someone. But we don't want to become lesser version. We don't want to sacrifice, as I said in the message, the fruit of the Spirit on the altar of winning an argument.
Right.
And so I think it's humility is the key.
Yeah. And I love you've pointed a question to us, and again, this has to be voiced in humility. Otherwise, it could be, if it's sarcastic or something, that's not going to help anybody. But how's that working for you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question that you pointed us. And I think maybe if I can take it a step further, it came in our chat room just before. There was someone who is like half a second ahead of you in terms of what are the big rocks.
Right.
Are there any resources or books that you would point to? I mean, there's obviously the Gospels, the accounts of Jesus' life in the Bible. But is there anyone who's done some writing that helps unpack the big rocks for us as followers of Jesus and help us draw our attention to them?
There's probably a list of great resources, Matt. Nothing's going to come to mind in this moment. But like I think that's why I keep pointing back to the Gospels even. Paul's writings is very interesting because Paul is unpacking the gospel to these churches. And you know what I like about Paul's writings is all those churches are at different places, just like we are all listening here. Right. The danger for me as a communicator is to try to apply all of this to you personally.
Right.
I don't know what you're going through personally. I don't know what your world is like. All I can do is lead you to a conclusion where you need to, what are the implications for your life, where you're at? What are the implications of the application of this for you personally, where you're at? But that's why I keep going back to the Gospels, because Paul takes that and unpacks it to churches who find themselves in very different places, some in conflict, some in peace, all over the place, just like we all are. So I'm sure there's great authors out there, and maybe some of our chat room hosts can throw in some stuff. If they can think of some books around the essentials. I certainly have read a lot, but I can't think of like one concise book.
Yeah, we're putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, I'd want to recommend right off the top here. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you said that. So it's like the implications are the responsibility that you've taken on as a teacher. Right. The applications are responsibility for us as people who are listening to the teaching. That's really cool.
Yeah, 100. Like how many times? And I've done it. I've done application. And I'm trying to apply it to you, and you might be sitting there going like, this doesn't apply, it's not where I'm at. But leading you to a place where you see the implications for your life, and then really the work you do out of a gathering like this is to say, how does this apply? Right. How does this apply to me? Yeah.
That's cool. We got a question from Kathy.
Yep.
This is a tough question to answer.
Okay.
I wish we didn't have to ask this. What do you think has to happen before we become okay, sorry, I misunderstood the question when I first read it. It's not as bad as I thought.
Good, Kathy.
It's not as tough. It wasn't
Okay.
a bad question.
Okay.
What do you think has to happen before we become an all-inclusive church like Jesus envisioned? What's the gap that we have between Jesus' envisioning of
Yeah.
his church and where we're at right now as a church?
You know, Kathy, and then that is a tough question, but it's a good one. I think we need to get over this idea that to include people, we need to agree with people. I remember a few years ago meeting with a dad whose son had made some choices, lifestyle choices that really disturbed him, and he was no longer in fellowship with his son, and even though his son still wanted fellowship, and to help lead him to a place that he could understand that you can love your son. Don't exclude him. And this is why excommunication and shame-based cultures shun. And shun is like worse than death, because people see you and they act like you're not even alive. Is there anything more damaging or
That's
damning
brutal.
than that? And so I think it's that understand that the truth and a confidence in the truth and confidence in God's Spirit. That if I can maintain a bridge to you, Matt, that means that bridge is there, that the love of Jesus can cross that bridge. If I cut the bridge, there's no way for this to happen. Even if I gave you truth, you're not going to listen to it unless you know that there's love in the middle of this, that I
Right.
care about you. And I think if, as a church community, if we could increasingly just know that the people we gather with when we're back in physical gatherings or even in this room right now, maybe we agree with 50%. If we really had time to unpack all of our personal beliefs about the great swatch of life and the great topics and areas of life, we'd probably find more disagreement than agreement. But we need to be able to be okay with that. And it doesn't mean that they're right or they're wrong or you're wrong, because somebody's wrong there for sure. Someone's right there. But it means we're all on a journey. And if we trust God's Spirit to lead us, and we're confident, if we keep focused on Jesus' death, his burial, and resurrection, that the Holy Spirit has a way of convicting us, changing us, and transforming us. And why should I try to put onto you what I've been a follower of Jesus for, 40 years. Why should I put all that knowledge onto you when you just came to Christ, when it's just like, hey, just fall in love with Jesus. All the other stuff will catch up over time. And we just need to trust that God is a better coach than we are, and maybe a better architect than we are.
That's good. I love Ralph J. was just pointing back to a previous question. One of the big rock resources could be Alpha. We have Alpha coming up
Fantastic,
just on the
Ralph.
other side of Easter. And so if you're looking for some big rock resources, there's a good one. Thank you, Ralph J., for putting that in. Right. Yvonne's got a question. How can we be winsome, like being gentle but strong in our conviction when speaking on sensitive topics? Is that the right approach for that?
Yeah. Like I think you know what it's like to have a generous tone, but I think even I ask lots of questions. If it's about me getting my point of view out first, or even just making sure they hear me, sometimes they're not in a position, and you can usually tell in an argument or a exchange whether or not there's even a willingness to
Right.
maybe move somebody's ideology.
Yeah.
If I don't sense some sort of willingness, again, this could be taken out of context, but when Jesus talks about not throwing your pearls before swine, it's kind of this idea that sounds so derogatory. It was better understood in that culture and context. But the idea is simply this, like, what are you trying to accomplish here? And I think if I see an unwillingness, I ask a lot of questions, because often when you ask questions of people, first, it shows you're interested in them, but also, two, it kind of plays out a lot of their convictions, and it shows the ends of them, maybe even the potential problems with them. And so often I'll let them lead themselves into a corner that way, or just leave it that way. If there's openness, then I want to dialogue. And I think, too, when you're debating, and this is where we're all different cultures, too. And have you ever noticed cultures talk with different levels of enthusiasm? And some levels of enthusiasm might sound offensive to some, or might sound very appropriate in exchange of ideas and debate. I think we need to practice the discipline of not being too sensitive, too. I think there's a little bit in that exchange that we recognize that, hey, in the end, we want to make sure we're shaking hands, We want to, well, or fist bumping. We want to be nodding in the same direction, like, hey, despite all that, we're good, right?
Right.
I don't see a lot of that in this world right now. But Jesus disagreed with a lot of people, and he's a great model for it. And I think, obviously, he had the corner on truth. But
right.
he could have gone around telling everyone they were wrong. And you notice he doesn't do that. The one person who's qualified to go around and say, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, he's not the one who does that.
Right.
And instead, people come at him, and he responds. But he's looking for an openness
Right.
there for people to receive it.
And his most generous responses were to those who weren't asking leading questions, where they wanted to trap him, or
Right.
they wanted to just sucker punch him, or catch him in something, or give an opening for them to say their own piece, right?
Well, and I think that speaks to the agenda, Matt, and that's really great insight, because if the agenda was simply to debate, to win an argument and everything, you notice Jesus gave little time to it, and when he did, it was very direct, and it was done pretty quick. But when people are asking questions, and it comes from a genuine either distorted theology or maybe some brokenness, he's incredibly patient with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's beautiful. That's a good distinction.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Jonathan. Those are some really good questions, and thank you to everybody who participated with those.